All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for switching over. I know there wasn't a lot of time between our welcome session and the keynote, so we appreciate you juggling the different sessions. That's one of the fun but not fun things about a virtual option is sometimes technology gets in the way and makes us take up a little more time. But I am thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Rich Nye. He currently serves as the Senior Advisor of Education for Governor Spencer J. Cox. Dr. Nye had been the Superintendent of Granite School District since 2021. He previously served as Superintendent of Ogden School District, as well as Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement at the Utah State Board of Education. As a career educator, he occasionally provides adjunct faculty services for the University of Utah and the Utah State University, teaching courses in educational policy and leadership. Dr. Nye earned a bachelor's and master's degree from Weber State University, as well as a master's degree in administration and supervision from Arizona State University, and I'm just tired thinking of all of these degrees you've earned, a PhD in teacher education and leadership from Utah State University. He also completed a Broad Academy Executive Fellowship and earned a certificate in education finance from the McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown University. We are thrilled to have you with us, Dr. Nye, and we're so excited to hear from you. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Chelsea. And no, I just appreciate it. If any of what's in that bio is just, if you're to know one thing, is that I love to learn. And that's hopefully what you get from that, is I love to learn. And it is an honor to be with all of you today. I sure appreciate what this conference is and what it represents and your interest in it. And certainly would like to give a shout out to the Utah State Board of Education staff who have gone through such great lengths to provide this wonderful conference for us to consider what school readiness looks like, what bridging the gaps looks like, and how we move forward as a state in that regard. So welcome Saturday morning, and appreciate, again, you being here. We have a wonderful group here with us, and we're going to take a look at a few things today, and we'll get right into that. But understand, as we go through the session materials here for the next little while, I would ask you just to consider your specific context and then understand it well, and then identify what that context might look like for us as a state, as we move forward in what school readiness looks like. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to launch right into this and see where we go. I'm just going to look for some affirmation that we're on the right page. As everyone's seeing, Chelsea's giving me a thumbs up. Thank you. So, and I'm so glad you're here, because when sometimes I bring up policy, people are, get a little nervous. Maybe, oh, thank you, the thumbs up. People get a little nervous about policy. Maybe it sounds a little bit boring. Maybe it sounds too political. But here's the thing, and I firmly believe this school readiness piece, particularly as it pertains to some of our preschool options, let alone our other infrastructure. I know we talked a little bit about that yesterday, what those components are. There's a lot of policy around those decisions, and we're going to dive right into that and understand, and at least in my opinion, thankful for, again, the State Board of Education, recognizing that I used to work for the State Board of Education, and so it's always near and dear to my heart. I've got the background of the State Board of Education here, but the comments that I will share today really are emphasizing more coming from that executive branch space in the governor's office. And so just wanted to make that clear. And if you have questions, I'll provide some contact information to you as well that you would want to follow up with. Please do so. So let's dive right in as to why school readiness is a policy decision. Here's the problem, and forgive this graphic, if you will. I'm somewhere along that continuum at any given time, right? So when we think about trying to find something new and different to say, maybe different, so you don't think that, I'm just saying the same things, you kind of flirt with that. Well, am I repeating the narrative in a way on that, and who doesn't love a good normal distribution curve, right? And you'll learn that about me in just a moment in terms of how the data speaks. Am I kind of on the left side of that distribution where I'm like a Hogwarts troll maybe, or am I more of that Jedi on the right, or am I somewhere in the middle? But here's the thing. I don't know that we need to find something new and different to say about school readiness. And we'll get to that in just a moment, because I believe repetition is key to getting the outcomes that we desire. Now, our strategies might change, how we engage might change, how we think differently about school readiness and policy implications might change. However, there's a fundamental root cause to why that narrative has to be consistent. And so we're going to jump into that. So a few things today. We're going to cover the landscape. I'll be brief here when it comes to the landscape. What is the current landscape across Utah for school readiness and some of our preschool efforts? The vision, where it is that we hope to see ourselves. We're going to get a little wonky, a little policy wonky on that policy and partnerships piece. And then, you know what, we're going to take a look at what Utah's brightest future looks like. And it is bright, but it's going to take a lot of work to get us there. So jumping right in, the landscape. And if you've been to Southern Utah, this is a shout out to Red Rock, Slick Rock, all things Southern Utah. But of course, we have a very diverse landscape across Utah. And for that reason, I want to pull into the fact that everyone in every part of our state has kind of a unique approach and a unique need to what school readiness initiatives and opportunities look like. And so I want to pull that out here. Even though the capital's here, clearly Salt Lake City, we are a much larger state than what's occurring just right here. And I want to pull that into the conversation as well. So where are we? I'm just going to put this here for, maybe a moment and let that sink in. So here's the thing. I pull this up, and as we're looking at this, Utah ranks for state-funded preschool programs, funding is largely to blame. These are the headlines that we get in Utah regularly. And but here's the thing, and you're going to hear me say this a little bit a few times today. I want to do a temperature check, right? I call it testing assumptions, right? I need to test my assumptions. So I'm going to test the assumptions, and this has just probably more to do with just making sure that all these things are working. But I'm going to put a question here that I would love for you to respond to and see what the response is. So here it is. Hopefully you see it. Here's the quiz, school readiness. Start here. We have all the preschool we need in Utah. True or false? All right. First and foremost, my objective of seeing if the poll works clearly works, and as people are responding to it, as I'm looking at this, as these results are coming in, right? It's by and large there's this I would say majority consensus that, you know what, we don't have all the preschool that we need in Utah. So we start there. For some of you, yeah, they're very much you're feeling like we're there. And so I'm just going to share those results a little bit so you can see. Yeah, by and large, we have some work to do, right? Depending where you're on the state. And again, for those that answer true that we have the preschool that we need in Utah, perhaps those situations or that perspective clearly is one to also be understood, right? But just generally, right off the top, assumption testing, I think we have some work to do. So we're going to stop that. We've shared the results, and we're going to move on. So where then lies the opportunity? Okay, there's a little bit more to the story. And so just right off the top, School Readiness Initiative Grant Program. We have this program. It's been functioning now for a while, and we're serving about 2,300 students. Last year, we ran and received some TANF funding over the next few years. Anyway, it increased 680 students. We have special education pre-K. We have 7,600 students receiving those services. Public school pre-K student enrollment. So you have some districts and charters who are saying, hey, you know what? In addition to what we're offering, we've created a space to provide pre-K services within our district. And we have about 15,000 students in our state that are enrolled in that. So as you were thinking about this, clearly we have more opportunity, and we're serving some pretty big populations too. Waterford Upstart is the online pre-K enrollment. We're about 13,210 students enrolled there. Now, here's the thing about data. And as we're looking at data, there maybe should be some red flags going off in terms of some of these numbers. First of all, which of these students are participating in duplicative pre-K programs or school readiness initiatives? We don't necessarily have that piece in this when we control for data. In other words, I'm thinking of a few districts right now. I served in a superintendent in a couple districts. Pretty passionate about all things that goes into that early learning space. I know that in some districts, of those 14,864 students, a lot of the districts will partner with the Waterford and help families connect. So you may have among that 14.8 and that 13.2, you might have some students doing both. And so trying to identify a baseline in our state has been a little bit difficult, because then you need unique identifiers, there's data sharing agreements, but I would say there's maybe some opportunity to get at a better baseline, is to say two things. One, we're serving a lot of students clearly just by some of these numbers. And two, at the moment, we're not necessarily sure if we're meeting the need entirely. I can speak anecdotally as a former superintendent that I would say we're not. Unfortunately, we had to turn away quite a few families who wanted pre-K services, and we simply didn't have the room, right? So we connected them to other resources, some of that online space, but there was always this growing demand. And so when we're looking at these numbers, I think in terms of bridging gaps, there is an opportunity, and it may come from a policy perspective, to get a better idea saying, well, how many students are we serving across all of these services as unique individuals? And then two, how many do we still need to engage who haven't been able to engage in pre-K programs that would like to? And so I think there's opportunity from a policy perspective to identify more of that, but maybe have some guardrails to consider that. I want to go, forgive me, Head Start enrollment, we have about 3,700 students there as well. But again, there might be some overlap in some of the services that students are receiving. I will, as we move forward, I want to take a look at funding just briefly. And because these dollars are real dollars, they're a nod to investments that are being made, even though, as we know nationally, we rate quite low in terms of the number of dollars that are spent toward this. We still need to understand, right, that these are approximate because they fluctuate, right? Approximate dollars. We're taking a look at high quality school readiness programs. We have some state dollars, we have federal dollars, we have some TANF dollars. The online pre-K Upstart, it varies from year to year. I think 2 years ago in the general session of the bill of bills, it was about $4 million. But here's a question that we need some more information on is, well, for all the districts that are in charters that are launching into expenditures for K or private, and I'll say private too, because we have private pre-K providers as well, we're not sure exactly, well, how much is going into this? In other words, if we're to say for our state, this is our investment, this is our enrollment in our pre-K space, that school readiness space. I don't know that we have a very clear answer right now to determine what that looks like. I think we've made some good strides, but I think there's a little bit more work to do to understand, one, enrollment, and two, the funding that's going into those efforts, and to do that, to identify what that might look like. So the vision. How do we get from here, recognizing that here is still a little murky, right? We're still working on what those total enrollment numbers are, what the total demand is, how much funding is going to it, how much funding might be needed. However, there's some general consensus among this vision. And meeting with Senate leadership about 2 weeks ago, they're identifying, yeah, we need to grow this, these opportunities in school readiness. It was fantastic, right? It was, as far as we're thinking about different policy makers, in this case, lawmakers, who the legislature controls the power of the purse. How do we identify a need and then match resources to meeting that need? And it's a vision that's not lost on our governor. As many of you know, Governor Cox has launched what's called Built Here. And this is really the second term of his administration priorities. So it boils down to people, place, and prosperity. And each of these pillars or strategic priorities have objectives and measures associated with them. And so I want to focus just a little bit on prosperity. That's that economy piece. Take a look down there at the very bottom. It says build an economy that celebrates entrepreneurs, rural Utah, education, and the spirit of work, spirit of service. And it's strategically placed here, that education piece, because it's long been known, and research, study after research study, has demonstrated that the strength of the educational system is highly correlated, clearly, to the strength of the economy. And the strength of the economy is good for the citizens, good for, individual homes, neighborhoods, communities, society, for the state, for the nation. And so that education plays a fundamental role. So within Built Here and prosperity under education, we have a very specific metric. I want you to take a look a little bit at this because, again, we're celebrating entrepreneurs, rural Utah, education, spirit of service. Our objective, one of the objectives, this is one of the objectives under prosperity. The objective is to expand access to early childhood development resources to future-proof prosperity for all Utahns. Now, I want you to think about that. When you think about school readiness, we're talking preschool in this case. How does the preschool future-proof prosperity for all Utahns? I know yesterday you heard from Milton Collins. He was one of my former principals at Lincoln Elementary, a fantastic individual, leads with love and service, compassion, and purpose. But he talked about diapers to diplomas, right? And I couldn't agree more, right? So as we're thinking about how early childhood development provides future-proof prosperity for all Teutons, there's a lot of research that backs that up. And so when we think about diapers to diplomas, I would say, from diapers to diplomas to careers to self-sufficiency to the good of the economy. And the lead metric that Governor Cox and Lieutenant Governor Henderson are focusing on is, well, hey, we need to double the number of students participating in online or in-person preschool programs. We need more students. And I want you to not lose sight of the interplay between those two issues. The more we grow and provide high quality preschool programs, school readiness initiatives, the more likely we're going to see a future-proof prosperity for all Utahns. And it's not just us saying that, right? So each of these headlines that have come out are clearly identifying this correlation that you want to talk about some intergenerational benefits of early learning programs. Children 50 years later are still experiencing the benefit for having participated in some school readiness initiatives, right? These are research. High quality early child care and education, the gift that lasts a lifetime. Okay, so it's that acknowledgement. I love the numbers. So investments in preschool can generate nearly 9 times the return on investment. And we've seen different studies over the course of the year that have verified that. Some say it's as high as 4 times, with a 300% increase on outcomes, to as much as 13 times the return on investment. So you think about, for every dollar that is spent in that school readiness space, in this preschool space, you're going to get 9 times the return on that investment in potentially cost savings or cost avoidance, if you will, or even benefit to the economy based on this. And I mean, the research on early childhood education is clear. In fact, at the moment, there's nationally just a resounding understanding that what we're doing in this pre-K space is good. It's good for individuals. It's good for families. It's good for neighborhoods, communities, society generally. It does that. So here we go. We're going to jump into policy and partnerships. And when I bring up policy, and partnerships, I want you to think of your context. So often when we think policy and the lawmaking process, we think of the legislature. We think of what occurs at the Capitol Hill. We think of what perhaps the governor's office is doing. That is all true and stands to reason. And I'm going to highlight a couple different ways to navigate that in the context that you're in. But 2, I want you to think, who else? Who else has that policy piece in mind that affects what it is that you would like to see happen in your context, and who else would you need to partner with. And so, again, I want to think as a former superintendent, right? We had preschool in my last district, still have preschool in our last district. There's policy shaped there at the local level. There's policy shaped at the charter school level. There's policy within a private. There's policy within any organization. There's some group is working through policy efforts. And so I want you to consider that as you think about policy and partnerships. Who in your context is setting policy? And start at the micro and go to the macro. So start in your immediate local context, and then take it broader to what does it look like for a state and a nation as we go through these things. I would say, as far as policy, as a former superintendent, I would work closely with my Board of Education that appoints me. We would identify our priorities, and we would move forward with a plan given the initiative. I will say in my last district, we faced some funding challenges with our preschool to the tune of around $1 million that we were coming up short regarding some budget cuts that we were being faced with, and some different funding revenue streams that weren't there anymore. And I would say it definitely took some policy and partnerships to not reduce services. And we were able to, through some budget harvesting, as I like to affectionately call it, between some budget harvesting and being able to identify where we could take from other departments or other programs, or working with the board to maintain what this priority is. That requires policy and partnerships. So I just want you to think multi-level in your space, in your condition, who's setting some policy and what partnerships exist. And the next set of slides, we're going to go through how to navigate some of that in a way that makes some sense. So I will start here. And again, I don't mean to bring too much politics into this space. However, that's kind of my world right now in terms of policy and politics. But I would just say, I mean, it's tribute to JFK, but political action is a higher responsibility of a citizen. And what we mean by that is how do we take our current condition, understand it, working with our elected officials, create the desired outcome that we hope to have amongst all of us. That's what I mean by political action, right? So we have elected officials, we work with our elected officials, and how do we get to a place where, as citizens, we're living in a space that we would want not only for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, and in perpetuity, those types of things. So that's why I bring that in the space. So I do want to call special attention. So it's Saturday morning. Let's be clear. Now, speaking on behalf of Gen Xers, we had what was called Saturday morning cartoons. Love Saturday morning cartoons. And as part of the Saturday morning cartoons, you would get these Schoolhouse Rock type commercials. They were cartoons, but they were commercials, let's be clear. And, I'm not trying to separate Gen X from any of the other generations. I'm just telling you, when I was a kid, if I wanted to watch cartoons, it was Saturday morning for a few hours. That was it. I didn't have Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel or all those things that, you could go through 7 days a week and watch cartoons if you wanted. So they were kind of special. But as a child, I remember, you know what? This, how a bill becomes a law. I remember it so vividly for lots of different reasons. So I'm going to play it in honor to Schoolhouse Rock, to that Saturday morning cartoons. But what I want you to recognize here is a process. As much as it's fun to watch a cartoon, and I hope all the audio and things like that work, I want you to identify the process. So there's a process that's outlined here that was shown to kids when they were little. Clearly adults were in the room, but it left an impression on me as a child. And while this process that, I'm just a bill is going to go through really speaks to what occurs at the federal government based on the Constitution of the United States, it's very, very similar to what we do here in Utah. We have a House, we have a Senate, we have an executive branch, and the governor. And the process of the bill following in our Utah Constitution follows very similarly to the Constitution of the United States for all the good reasons. But at the same time, this process, I just want you to juxtapose not only at the federal level, but the state level. And then we're going to open up a little opportunity to engage. So let's see what I'm Just a Bill has to say. See, are we not hearing audio?
Yeah, there's no audio.
Yeah, that doesn't work. That's
I know when you go to, you could stop sharing, and then when you click to share again, there's like a little checkbox on it's usually the right-hand side that says share sound.
I'm going to stop share. Oh, that's too bad. I do apologize to the group.
Yeah, and then you
This is all
can,
on me. This is not on USBE or UEN. This is on me. So,
it's okay.
um,
It's a little checkbox. So if you go to share again, before you select which screen, there should be a little like option, share options, and there's a
share
checkbox that you click
sound.
for
Yep,
share
there it
sound.
is. All right, let's try that.
This Capitol building here in Washington.
How about now?
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in
Thumbs up, love it.
Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm gonna live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. How I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
All right. I hope you're as happy as I am that bill is now a law, right? Depends on the bill. But oh, there was a hand raised. Okay.
Yeah, I think they were trying to react, but Dr. Nye, I just noticed that there are some gray squares on your screen. I think those are the Zoom, like we were having this problem in our last session. We're not quite sure what they are, but I think it's like the, you know, how the Zoom screen, like the chat or something pops up. It was blocking what the screen was showing. So maybe we'll try again with the share, and hopefully that won't be an issue. We could see the video, so I didn't notice it until just now.
Okay.
But
So I will reshare and see if that
okay.
hopefully
And let's hope.
resets something.
Yeah. I'm still not sure why those show up sometimes and not others, so I don't know.
Okay, let's try this. Are we sharing?
Yes, it looks like it's loading.
Some thumbs up there. Excellent. So real quick, right, in terms of that process, you know, someone has an idea, they say, hey, it ought to be a law. I'm going to highlight this one right here. So this was SB 220, School Readiness Amendments, is kind of one of the later or last ones, and kind of an adjustment to some previous legislation that was ran. But this was ran back in 2024. Senator Milner and Representative Hall ran this bill. And it was an idea, right? We had experienced some things with school readiness that needed to be adjusted in code, and maybe some funding adjustments, and so it went through the process. So the bill sponsor is Senator Milner. Because it began in the Senate has to hear it a few times. Once they get it to where they want it and they get the votes, it heads over to the House. And just like what we saw when Just a Bill with Schoolhouse Rock, what ends up happening is at that point, it heads to the governor's desk, and the governor can sign or veto. You clearly sign this one, and on we go. So when we're thinking at the macro, what does that policy aspect look like around school readiness? It certainly absolutely includes our legislature. Last year, Senator Lincoln Fillmore, we worked with him on a request for an appropriation. That's an RFA, trying to avoid the acronyms, but a request for appropriation to get even more money. We were hoping for $2 to $3 million more to put towards some school readiness and pre-K opportunities. In other words, we got together. This is and has been a priority of the governor to grow and invest in school readiness. You identify a legislator who's willing to work on those types of things, and you run it through the process. You will see every year the governor submits to the legislature what his budget proposals are, right? Things for them to consider as they move through the budget process. And as they do that, within those line items of funding, it creates a space where the governor can say, well, what are some things that that we need to consider? And you will see, and I'm not trying to give out anything, because right now the governor's budget isn't public for this next legislative session, but I will give you a little teaser that you'll likely see some school readiness recommendations in funding coming from the executive branch, from the governor's office. So we're continuing to work on those. As you know, it's a tight budget year, as we hear, but we still have to fund those things that are of a priority, and school readiness is clearly a priority. So I want you to provide what I call the policy process. And this isn't unique to me, right? And this will resonate with the State Board of Education staff, because often they have to go through what is called building a business case to make a funding request of their board. And a lot of those same principles are found here. So when you think about the policy process, if you want to be successful advancing a policy, whether it's with the legislature, whether it's with Congress, whether it's with your own locally elected boards or charter boards or whoever it may be, you need to create a process to how to do that. And so you'll see just a few bullet points here. We're going to dig deep into them just in a moment. First, you need to identify the issue, recognizing an issue that requires attention, right? You saw on Not Just a Bill, they wanted a stop sign, and they want train tracks, and you get the idea the bus has to stop at it. What is the issue? Or as many say, what is the problem that we're trying to address? In other words, I want you to think right now around school readiness. What's an issue that you feel requires some attention from a policy perspective? Then, once you have that, and we'll give you a moment here to dive deeper into that, what is the data, the research, and the analysis regarding that issue? Because generally speaking, when we think of an issue that we're trying to address, it's not unique, meaning someone else has had to navigate this. Is it another state? Is it another institution? Is it an agency? Is it a district? Is it a school? Someone's already had to go down this road. What data is available to situate the challenge that I'm experiencing to help describe what is my data narrative? And that moves you from anecdotal to substantive. And substantive is both qualitative and quantitative. Then you get to formation. Policy formulation? What are the possible solutions? And how do they inform a potential course of action? And solutions with an S, right? It's not just solution. Rarely is there one solution to as highly complex issues that we're addressing. So there's multiple solutions. What are those? Consultation, you need to be very intentional on who you're getting feedback from. We'll talk about that just a little bit more here in a minute. And then the last three of the policy process, we get to adoption. What are the necessary resources? Oftentimes manifest in funding to carry out the policy. We work to implementation. That's where the action, right? The policy hits the road. And then good policy process. And this last bullet oftentimes is the most neglected. I will say that. This policy monitoring evaluation. Once we're carrying out the action, we've identified a course of action, we've put some things into place. How are we knowing whether or not the policy is achieving its objectives? And that's largely understood through this evaluation piece of it. However, because it's the most neglected, unfortunately, it can also be the most impactful, because that last bullet, this could lead, when done well, when you monitor and evaluate how current policy is affecting action and you're seeing good outcomes, it can lead to new cycles or adjustments. These are good things. Perhaps we develop a proof of concept, right? We've had this partnership. We talked a little bit about partnerships yesterday. We have these partnerships. This is how they're working. This is how families are being served. This is how children are experiencing education. These are the impacts on student outcomes. And we would want to take that to scale, right? We would want others. And that's where that last bullet piece comes in. So, issue identification. This is where you start. What is the challenge that you would like to address? And I put in assumption testing, the 5 whys. You know, a toddler is really good at asking why. I think we need to be more like our 2-year-olds when asking why when it comes to issue identification. And probably the quintessential 5 why root cause determination is, and forgive me if you've heard the story, but I feel like it's worth repeating, is the Thomas Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. What they found in Washington, D.C., at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial specifically, is the granite and marble was eroding. It was pitting. It was desurfacing. It was falling apart. And so a group said, well, why is it doing this? And that's your first why. Why do I see this problem with the structure and the aesthetic of the Jefferson Memorial? And so they asked why. Why is that happening? Well, the first why was because we're using harsh chemicals to clean it. And they're like, well, why are you using harsh chemicals to clean it? Well, that's the second why. Well, because we have bird droppings everywhere. And it takes some powerful chemicals to get those bird droppings off. All right. Why do we have bird droppings? There's another why. Well, because the birds here, because they like to eat the spiders that are around the Jefferson Memorial. They said, well, why do we have so many spiders around the Jefferson Memorial? They said, well, because there's a lot of insects around the Jefferson Memorial. And they said, well, why are there a lot of insects at the fighters' feet? You get the idea. And the long story short is, well, why are there so many insects in this issue that we're trying to address? Why are there so many insects at the Jefferson Memorial? It's because, well, how we illuminate it at night and the hours in which we illuminate it are drawing the insects. And so then they were able to engage and adjust the lighting, and guess what? They didn't have the problem. And so when you think about an issue that you're trying to address, you have to do some assumption testing. I like to use the 5 whys to get to what is the root issue. And so I'd really like to challenge you, when you think about school readiness, what is the issue and pick the issue, right? So We already looked earlier in this presentation where funding as a national level is being attributed to, and the state level, as to why we're not seeing as much expansion in Utah around pre-K efforts. Great. But I would ask you, well, why? Now you can take that one of two ways. You can say, well, why isn't there funding? And we can have that discussion. Or you can say, why do we want to expand pre-K? And that's where I'd like you to sit for just a moment. So I would like you to respond to this question, if I can pull it up. I want you to respond to this question. It's launched. I want you to think specifically about your context and enter or respond to this poll. You are very much going to be part of what is a policy-driven discussion, and your feedback is going to help me have those discussions, let alone it's going to help you in your current context. So what is a school readiness issue or challenge you would recommend addressing through policy? Take a moment to think about that and go ahead and enter as you formulate that response.
Hello again, Dr. Nye. Thank you so much. I'm going to see if we can, while we're doing this poll, if we can see if we can reset your sharing screen again, kind of like you did before with Chelsea. I'm wondering if it's because we need to have you, when you share your slide deck, to share your screen versus just the window with the slide deck. So I think what's happening is when you're getting like a pop-up notification or something that shows up on your end, it then creates a gray box because Zoom Events automatically excludes it. So you may be seeing on your end a red outlined square that says move this away from the presentation screen window. That is Zoom just letting you know that that may be then blocking what the attendees can see. If I'm making sense. I was trying to figure out what had happened to me this morning and how that might be the same thing that's happening to you and how we could fix that. Next, we'll just bring in Kim from UETN and see if she can help us. But if you'll just share your slide deck again, but this time click the share screen option instead of sharing a window. We can see if that helps.
We'll definitely try that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to go backstage again, and Chelsea's still in here to help you as needed. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Question, is that doing it?
No, it's not. And so I guess that was not the solution to the square. In fact, there's more this time, but I do see you moving one.
So then that's the poll and quiz. What if I minimize that?
Yeah, then we can see behind it now. And then there's one in
Interesting.
the bottom right and the top.
Yeah, there's nothing on my
Yeah.
screen.
That is weird. We didn't have this issue yesterday, so we love technology.
I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault. It was happening to us in the other session too, so we don't know what's going on. But I think we can see the majority of your slides, and so I don't think it's been
Oh, I'm so sorry.
like detrimental, but yeah, we'll try and figure it out for the future too.
Okay. All right, we have some great responses in there at the moment, though, because let's pull up the polls again. I'm going to go back. That poll should still be open for a moment, and we'll let people do that. My guess is the gray square came up again. Okay. Let's move on and recognizing the time. Thank you for those responses. We're going to be able to take a look at those and going to identify what some of the issues that you're seeing, what this group is seeing. And the reason I value your, well, lots of reasons, value your input so much. One, I am a school readiness and preschool advocate. No question. I believe in all that it offers. And at the same time, I recognize that I've got preschool and school readiness experts on this call. And so what you're in your roles are going to help me as an advocate understand is what some of those issues are that you're facing. So I do want to move to data research and analysis. Hopefully you can see some of these. I don't intend to read all of these, but when you're talking about your issue, unless you situate it, when you think about the policy process and whoever you're talking about, unless you situate it within some of the data and what the research says and what some careful analysis would propose, it kind of loses its strength to advance meaningful policy. So one thing you need to consider is of the issue that you identified, what data is available to understand that issue? How are you going to get at that data? Who do you need to talk to? What needs to be better understood in these data? And what research has already been done in this area? That third bullet point is critical. What are the points, right? Because all of us are coming into it thinking we have a pretty good feeling as to what the issue is. And how we're feeling about it is very, very valid. And at the same time, there's going to be others who have a difference of opinion, and they might have some counterpoints that need to be considered in that analysis. And then last but not least, use that data and couple it with a narrative to drive change. In other words, I can show spreadsheets and normal distributions and charts and graphs all day long. I can show you the R value, what the Z scores are. We can do all the statistical analysis. And at the end of the day, that's not going to motivate a lot of people. What you need to be able to do is situate what the data say, even when they're just measures of central tendencies, right? Your mean, median, and mode. Even if you just have percentages, how are you going to couple that with a narrative? In other words, how does this impact a specific child or a classroom or a school or that private provider? What does that look like in that online space? Whatever your data you're bringing to frame the conversation, unless you couple it with a narrative that actually describes these data, you'll lose the strength of that policy opportunity. Policy formation, what are a range of possible solutions? In other words, you have a logic model, you have a theory of action, or you have a business case. Is it obvious? And so we're going to try this again. We're going to go to our polls, and I want you to, given the issue that you identified, what is your thinking about policy formation? What is something in terms of a solution that you would entertain? So let me go ahead and end the issue identification poll, and we're going to move to the policy formation poll. What are some potential solutions you see in policy from your perspective, from your context? And I'm going to move this gray screen here so you can take a look at that. So we'll take just a moment and what are your potential solutions? Again, if one potential solution is, hey, we need more money, in that policy formation, you just have to clarify what the ask for the money is, and then attach it to why it's needed. Because unfortunately, when you think through the policy formation, so often we just say, hey, if we just had more money, if we just had more money, and you're not wrong. I mean, we can do a lot, right, with that resource, but there's other considerations. How would you present and how you're thinking through that policy formation as you're thinking through this solution? How does it go beyond just funding to get there? And I appreciate those of you that are entering different policy formation solutions. What are these solutions? I tell you this, with what you're providing here, it won't stop here. It won't end today, but it's going to inform a much broader conversation that we're going to have with individuals across, depending on how you responded, across multiple stakeholders. So thank you for taking some time and providing this feedback, giving your perspective and expertise. Okay, looking at the time, I'm going to leave that open. So continue to respond, that poll, continue to respond. Just want to touch on a couple different things while you're still typing. This policy consultation is once again, it's key. And in your mind, you've identified an issue. You're working through some potential solutions. Who in your mind is going to support it? Equally important to ask is who in your mind might reject it and why? That third bullet, for those that reject it, how will you, as this individual that are looking to bring forward a solution, how will you engage with intellectual integrity? And for me, as I define intellectual integrity, it's how am I going to respond in the presence of information that I hadn't considered or had initially disagreed with, but now actually find an argument for? Meaning, if I'm presented with a bunch of new information that I didn't have that formed my previous opinions, how am I going to incorporate that into my thinking? That's what I mean by intellectual integrity. And then how are you going to be intentional about reviewing feedback that wasn't and it's a space? So think about your stakeholders in that space. And who doesn't love a good matrix? I mean, I do. I love a good matrix. But anyway, when you're thinking about your stakeholders or that consultation, a good matrix says, hey, if the influence of a stakeholder is high and their interest is high, that upper right-hand quadrant of the matrix, I need to engage them most thoroughly. I've developed out, and you would want to develop out, a communication plan. How am I going to engage them? What do they need to know? When do they need to know it? How will they know it? Where will they know it? And how will I know that they know it? Right? I mean, a communication plan covers all those bases. If there's someone that has very little influence and very little interest, you know what? I just need to create some situational awareness for them so they know what's going on. But you know what? My contact's going to be pretty minimal with that stakeholder. And at the same time, again, this is what I mean about being intentional through that policy making process to identify how I engage others regarding this policy and potential solution. Policy monitoring evaluation, we already talked about this. You need to know whether or not the policy and the associated action is achieving its objectives, and are we communicating that? That's that last bullet, so it can lead to new cycles or adjustments. Now, I believe this is a Q&A opportunity as well, where people can ask questions. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and just open it up, and Chelsea or anyone from the state board staff, however you would want to navigate this question and answer period. I know it's been done in other sessions, and I'm open to questions and comments and feedback additionally.
All right, so then for our participants, please go to the Q&A to input any questions that you would like Dr. Nye to answer. It does look like we have a comment from Pam Alcott saying, as an immigrant, the video you shared is how she learned about the bills in her college class. And then Susie Estrada asked, are we looking at data from states like New Mexico, who recently allocated state funding for universal preschool?
I think this is a great question, Susie. As we're thinking about, and it was noted, right, other states have already gone down this road. Utah lags a little bit behind. And what we're looking at there is to say, well, what can we learn from other states? And so a lot of states have gone, and you're seeing some, and I'll pull it out here, right? You're seeing some blue states, you're seeing some red states that are kind of going down this road. We are looking at those things from states like New Mexico. I think part of this policymaking process, first and foremost, Utah has been ranked, and I know it's a flex and we're in national conversations, but it should resonate here. Utah ranks number one in a lot of things. We rank number one in our economy, nationally, right? And so a lot of people are saying, hey, we're already doing some good things. And we're, on several different measures, we're, top 5 for education outcomes in the nation. So they're saying, well, we're already kind of doing some good things. But at the same time, we all know intrinsically and the data substantively that we're still not meeting, the needs and the student outcomes that we'd want for all our students. So we have the comparison. Great. Other states that have gone down the road with universal pre-K. I'm just telling you, that's some of the opposition that we hear sometimes, and not by opposition, but just comment, right? Is, hey, we're already doing some good things. Why do we need to grow this? Well, we can do even better, right? As part of that discussion. The question is, how many preschool age students live in the state? So I think that's a great question. And frankly, I don't know that I have a good answer. And I believe therein lies an opportunity and a gap. I think it's understood that we're not meeting the needs because we anecdotally, again, we have families coming saying, hey, we would want some preschool services. We have families saying, hey, I want brick and mortar pre-K, you get the idea. They're saying, and they're getting turned away. So Carrie, I think it's a fantastic question. I think we need to do some work there. We have some census data that we kind of work off of, but I couldn't give you a number right there, and I wouldn't want to give you bad information or hazard a guess.
Oh, and then Amy just asked, what can we do to work together with public and private?
Yeah, I think this is a key partnership question. I think what can we do to work together with public and private? When I think of what the private school readiness initiatives are, clearly the public are public, right? I think a lot of the challenges between that public-private partnership has a lot to do with just awareness of what's available. And so I would say in terms of generating more public-private partnerships is being strategic as to how to create more awareness around what is available in that private space, because there's a lot of good private pre-K options. Families and within the community and the public offerings as well, I think can just coordinate better. I think that's a great issue when we identify opportunities to fill a gap. But it is creating awareness. How when you think of communication plan, like I illustrated just verbally, but as you're looking through a communication plan, what does that intentional engagement look like in that partnership? And it starts with awareness.
Right. Well, that are all of the questions currently. I don't know if anyone has a last minute question or if you have anything else you would like to share with us.
I just I want to move from Q&A. I just want, in terms of Utah's brightest future, this is an investment. I mean, just in closing, the more we do around school readiness opportunities lead to better outcomes for people, for place, for prosperity. The research makes that abundantly clear. A lot of the policy-making decision occurs here in our state's capital. And at the same time, there is a lot of local effort that needs to occur to make these type of investments that can occur outside of what occurs at the Capitol. So I would just encourage all to engage on that local front, the local effort, your specific context, to identify what that might look like. And then lastly, thank you. As much as I had everything to say, it's not all about bills. Sometimes it is about bills and the laws that get passed and the funding that allocates. So just gratitude in my heart as a former superintendent with understanding how critical that early learning space is, that school readiness space. Students do truly show up in a much better place when they've had opportunities to learn and to grow in those younger ages. And we definitely see. So thank you for all of your efforts in engaging in opportunities for families to participate in school readiness initiatives. And that was my email. Please feel free to reach out and contact me if there's things that you think of that we can partner on, or policy implications that you would like us to consider. Please reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here bright and early on a Saturday morning. To everyone who's here, but especially you, Dr. Nye. I learned a lot and it was really helpful. So thank you so much for all those insights and information. And our next
you.
session doesn't start until 11. So everyone you have a little break between now and the next session to kind of take a break and then get ready for the upcoming session that you pick. So thank you everyone again for being here. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.